Hi guys, I'm Sliding Stan Steve, and we're gonna start a new series where I talk to bobsled, skeleton, and luge athletes. And my first guest is John Napier.
Steve, thanks for having me. I appreciate what you do, sharing the story of sliding sports. Like we were just talking, you're definitely filling a piece. And for people like me who are retired from the sport now, if I feel like I get to still be a part of it and keep up to the day-to-day of sliding sports through what you do. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So you got most athletes nowadays, they get into it through post-college track and field, football, and all that. But you started very young as a bobsled driver. What was that like?
Yeah, so I started in the Pee Wee bobsled program. I started sliding in 1994. The Pee Wee bobsled program has been around. It's been a core program in Lake Placid, and a junior bobsled program also a very long time. You know, I talked to some of the old timers, and they say in the 50s and 60s it was around. So I got involved in 1994. My father was a bobsled athlete in the 60s and 70s and 80s. My mother was also a bobsled athlete, so as a kid growing up, that's all I could ever imagine doing. And that junior and Pee Wee bobsled program that was run by the Olympic Authority gave me a chance to do that, gave me a chance to live that dream. So I competed in the youth levels, and then I was very, very fortunate to be able to move up and compete at the international stage when I got old enough to. So as a kid, it was just, you know, once a week in the winter, we came up every Friday night and we'd slide, and then we'd have some sliding time on Saturdays, and we'd race against other local kids. I was living in Schenectady, New York at the time, and my family always had a house up here, so we'd drive up and stay for the weekend, and I'd get to compete. So it was kind of a dream come true.
In 2009, you made history in two-man bobsled when you not only outpaced Steve Holcomb, but also looters from Canada, and there was a Switzerland team.
Yes. Yeah, I got to race my first World Cup in 2005, I believe, 2006 season, and from there I just kept progressing in the sport, kept saying, okay, what are my weaknesses? What do I need to do to get better to be on the international stage and be at the level where I could compete for a World Cup medal someday? Well, in 2009, I was fortunate enough to work enough of those kinks out to where I was a contender. To date, I think my best two-man finish before that was a 10th place. I had a couple 5th places in 4-man. I think I even had a 4th, but my best two-man finish was 10th place. And Steve, it was the weirdest thing. I'll never forget that day. I woke up, I rolled out of bed, and I said to myself, "I'm going to win this race today." And it was a strange feeling. I knew it wasn't a statement. It wasn't a question. It was. I knew that day I was going to win that race. And so I walked to the track, and I remember looking down the starting line, and I knew with the absolute certainty I was going to win that race that day, and I did. And it was a blessing. You know, my mother was sidelined. Unfortunately, my father passed away a couple years prior, so I wasn't able to be there to watch that. But that was my first World Cup medal and my first World Cup victory, and it was on my home track in Lake Placid, so it meant a tremendous amount. Yeah.
You've been mentioning your father, William, and your mother, your mother Betsy.
Yes.
What was it like watching him as you grew up as doing bobsled?
My father was a huge part of my inspiration in the sport. It's how I learned about sliding sports. And I think my parents tell me when I was 2 weeks old, they drove me to the track and pulled me up the track on a little sled just to, be present. So I remember as a kid, every weekend I was out there watching a lot of the bobsled racers. Tuffy Latours and Brian Scheimer was like an idol to me as a child. And I got to see the 95 Bodine Challenge here. And I get to watch many of the greats, and Prince Albert race, and I got to watch Wolfgang Hoppe race back in the early '90s, and just a lot of those guys I grew up idolizing and watching them in the sport. And so to share that with my dad was something very special. We really both loved the sport, and I learned a lot about it from him. And I remember many, many days being side of the old track, 1980 Olympic track, watching sleds with him. And he and I got to slide together once. I have a good picture of he and I sliding together. I think probably in 1998 or so.
Yeah. He was also the president of USA Bobsled and Skeleton, and in 2010 he was honored with a Hall of Fame nomination and induction.
He was, yeah. He was a president of the federation and very involved in the sport. He was a Schenectady, New York native. He bought a piece of land and a cabin up here sometime in the 70s. The way he told it to me was he came up on a weekend to just watch the sports, and he watched the sport and just fell in love. And was like, what is this? I need to do it. And back then it was, New York State taught, it was a conservation department that ran the track, and they taught the drivers, and so he got into a driving program and learned to drive bobsleds. Many people that I talked to said my father was a great bobsled driver. So,
Nice.
Yeah.
Your mom also was a bobsled. Was she part? Because there was a group of women before the 2002 Winter Olympics that were chiseling out, making sure that women can be. Was she a part of that group?
Yeah, my mom slid in the 70s, so she did some sliding in the 70s. She competed from the half mile of the mile-long 1980 Olympic track, and she got involved in the 80s. I got some pictures of her competing too. It was pretty neat to bring it back home. So.
You made it into the 2010 Winter Olympics. You placed, I believe, 10th in 2-man, and you crashed out in 4-man. What was that like?
The Olympics are, any Olympic athlete, any athlete that reaches that level doesn't do it alone. They, for me, my parents were huge supporters. I had sponsors. I was an Army athlete. They were a huge supporter, but also a lot of local support and friends. And the way I describe the Olympics to people is it's like a puzzle, and the athlete's the picture on that puzzle, but maybe it's a 1,000-piece puzzle, and if you miss one piece, then the picture's not complete, and that's how it really felt to me. It felt like a very humbling experience, because you get there and you just realize this is such a big event that you can't do it alone, and you didn't do it alone. So for me, that's the overwhelming kind of thing I took away from the Olympics, was a humbling experience. And in a 2-man, I placed 10th place. I struggled the entire 2 weeks with some tricky parts of that track, the 50-50 curve, that Holcomb famously named. And I've got a good story about when he named that, because the first day we were there in Vancouver for the test event, half the sleds crashed and half didn't. And Holcomb and I were towards the end of the field, and so we got to watch the first half of the field, and it was crash. Another sled made it, then another sled would crash. And so we went down that day and made it during the test event, and Holcomb came back the next day with a sign that said 50/50, and he taped it to the top of the corner. So that's kind of how that was named. And but unfortunately, I was making a mistake the whole 2 weeks, and I just couldn't correct it. And so race day came in the 4-man, and I was in, I believe, 5th place the first run, top 5 or 6, and it was a great competitive field. And my push crew did a great job the first run. The second run, I made a mistake maybe 2 or 3 corners beforehand, and you're going so fast there, and the track was so difficult that day that it just couldn't make the correction. I saw it coming, and I was like, I do believe I was like screaming, no, pulling the rope as we were heading upside down. So.
You said that I did see that you have been coaching para-bobsled.
Yeah.
So you've been around people like Daniel Snipes Jr., Will Castillo,
Yep.
Gabby Cha, Bob Bog, Corey Mapp from Great Britain, and Israel Blanco of Spain. How was it like coaching para-bobsled athletes?
I believe para-bobsled is the purest form of bobsled. When I was taught bobsled. I grew up in an older generation of bobsledders than we see now, and you could say there's a lot of athletic talent out there now. And back when I grew up, there was a lot of beautiful drivers that I learned from, and I got to see. And bobsled to me, in para bobsled, is the purest form, and I say that because you eliminate the push start, you eliminate the equipment advantage. The only thing you're left with is driving talent. And it's so beautiful that you see a lot of times the great drivers, the Israels, the Corey Mapps, the Bob Balks, obviously, Chris Stewart's, and Lonnie Bissonette when he was competing. A lot of these guys, they're on top consistently. And as a coach, when I watch them drive, they're driving the best consistently. And so that really, to me, is just such a pure form of this sliding sport because you eliminate every other advantage, and it really is just up to the driver. You know, and the beautiful thing about the para program is you don't need legs, you don't need your spinal cord to function. But you just need, well, now with David Snipes, you need one arm.
Yeah.
You just need one arm, and we can put you in a bobsled at 80 miles an hour,
Yeah.
firing down an icy chute, which seems crazy, with your hair lit on fire.
Right.
It's just an awesome program. It's a beautiful sport. I really am praying and hoping that it gets into the Paralympics because it belongs there.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's a sport where, because in bobsled in general, there's a lot of guys that are retiring in their 40s and late 30s, but you have Bob Balk, he's in his 50s and he's going 80 miles an hour.
And I tell people all the time, I think Bob Balk is one of the most talented bobsled drivers, able-bodied or not, that I've ever seen. I mean, the guy, I think when it was in his third or fourth day I ever coached him, he was off the top of Lake Placid. And I was like, man, he's very talented. And he's something you can coach, you can tell him to do something, and he can implement it. The next run, he can do that change. And that comes from his background in sport. He's been involved in sports for a very, very long time. He's a multi-time Paralympian skiing. And I think, I think his athleticism as a whole is there. It's there. And it's in his hands as a driver. So, yeah.
We just had the IBSF Congress, and Coach Tuffy is now the VP of Sport. Do you have any cool stories about him?
So Tuffy was competing when I was a child, learning how to drive bobsleds in the Pee Wee and Junior program. Tuffy grew up in Schenectady, New York. I grew up in Schenectady, New York. Tuffy was one of, I believe, 9 brothers. And I grew up best friends with one of his younger brothers, Ryan. So Tuffy and my family, had been close for a long time. He knew my father. My father was back involved and alive. And so I know him for a long time. I have some pictures where we were learning to do push starts as junior sliders, and what we would do is we would take those junior sleds to the ice rink, and they'd allow us to cut one groove in the ice at the ice rink, and we would push the sleds, the kids would push and jump in, and I have a picture standing there with Tuffy from when I was, maybe only, 4 feet tall or so, and really, really, really skinny. So I've known him for a while. I think he's a great steward of the sport. He's a great historian about bobsled.
Oh, yeah, his Instagram, yeah.
Yeah, and he knows a lot about it, and he's got a great legacy in the sport too. And so I think it's a great move for the IBSF, and I look forward to seeing his leadership in that VP role.
Yeah. What was one of the things that stood out to you in this past Winter Olympics in bobsled?
This last Winter Olympics in bobsled, I think that the Cortina track, I knew the old Cortina track, but this new Cortina track was very, very technical up top. And so nobody was crashing, but you saw a lot of mistakes. A lot of people were sliding and skidding around. And you could tell a lot of the more veteran drivers were doing better with that. They weren't having as many problems in skids. And I think that just comes with experience. Bobsled, we talk about when you're piloting the sled, the pressure, the force that you feel under those blades, the runners that you're on. And I think a lot of talented drivers have that feel for that track. That track was very unique, very technical. The curves were really laid back, open, which means you don't feel a lot of pressure, which is why I think I saw a lot of the old veteran drivers doing better, because they could just anticipate those types of little nuances more. And really, our women's team did great. In fact, they'll do good, very, very good standing in the 2-man event, very impressive.
They even said that in the World Cup prior to the Winter Olympics, they mentioned that Alana Mars-Taylor and Kaylee Humphreys were the veterans out of all the women who had gone on the Cortina track back in the day. So there was that familiarity as well.
Yeah, yep, and they've been driving a very long time, those two. Alana and Kaylee, both are very talented bobsled drivers. Yeah.
Is there anybody that maybe didn't make it into the Winter Olympics that you've been following that you would like to see make it into the next Winter Olympics?
Oh boy. I know the U.S. program has some youngsters coming up now, and there's one of them, Grady Mercer, I've been watching a little bit.
Yeah.
And, it's exciting to see another person come from the youth and come up. I know he's a younger driver, and from my perspective, I was a young pilot. I raced my first World Cup when I was 17 years old. on America's Cup circuits, racing at 18, 16, 17, 18, 19. And so it's neat to see another young driver doing so well. So I really look forward to watching his future in the U.S., that'll be interesting to see.
Is there any federation outside of the U.S. that you like watching?
I'll tell you, I really have a heart for the small nations. One of the problems with the sport is it's expensive, and
Yes.
and it precludes a lot of people from doing it. And so I just love the small nations. I love Jamaican teams. I love Brazilian teams. I love the smaller nations that are able to get out there and compete. Puerto Rico has a skeleton team with Kelly, and I really like watching those smaller nations compete and do well. I wish the sport was more inclusive to be more affordable. That's my wish, is that in the future is that they solve that problem and make the sport more affordable so that more nations can get to experience this and do this and compete at this level. It's a very unique sport. As kids, you go out and you find a sledding hill. Yeah. And you want the heaviest sled, and you wax the bottom, or you put some silicone on the bottom, and it's about going the farthest and the fastest, and and with the biggest sled, fastest sled. And we're just kids doing that. We're still doing that out there. It's just we now have a nice track that's a mile long and refrigerated, and you have some horses that run 10-second 100-meter sprints that are pushing you and squat 500 pounds, and so I just really look forward to the inclusion and seeing more small nations be able to do this sport.
As of last year, Kenya got recognized, and they were at the Congress, and now they're doing their trials.
Yeah, I saw your post on Kenya. That's going to be really exciting. Yeah. That's pretty neat. Yeah, very, very neat.
So.
I think there's a way that the IBSF, especially when you have people like Tuffy in there, that can solve that affordability problem and really get small nations to grow their programs. And Kenya's Brazil's a great example, and Jamaica. They have what a history, what a story, right? They've made us all famous in a way with cool runnings, and so I really look forward to the future of the sport in that way, because for me, the spirit in Olympics is to take part, right? We all want to go and win a medal, but just to be there and to take part in such a beautiful event where so many nations come together to compete against each other.
And it's very interesting seeing how the sport is very big, but it's also very small, and that smallness allows for nations to work with each other. Just recently, Great Britain has another Latvian helping them out. I believe China has 2 Austrian former bobsled athletes coaching them as well. So there's this camaraderie. Yeah. Even though it's a sport, it's a time trial sport, but there's a sense of rivalry.
There is, yeah. It is a time trial. It's down to the 100th, right? But there is a good camaraderie amongst the nations, and everybody wants to win, but everybody wants to see the sport thrive too, and that's an important part, is to make it accessible for other nations. And so helping other nations and helping other sliders kind of get there and get to that stage is just, it needs to be a goal of all of ours who are still involved to some degree in this sport.
Yeah, I've noticed that there's 3 types of retirements that sliding sport athletes go. There's those that retire and they cold turkey. They don't do anything with it. Maybe they might post here and there about it, like their former classmates, but they're done. Then there's people who retire, but they put their mentions out. Like, I don't want to do anything long term, but I'm okay doing mentorship, doing consulting. Like, I think Axel Young is in that. Okay. I think he's going to be working with his father, but he's still like, hey, I will mentor anybody who wants it, but I'm not doing a full-time coaching. Yeah. And then you have those who are track is life. They're coaches, they're track workers, they're the executives. They're very still much into the sport. Yeah.
I tried the first one, that was my goal, is to step away and be totally away, but it doesn't work. It keeps pulling me back in because, bobsled's not, it's in here, right? For me, it's my family's, our passion. We're always following it, and it's in here. When I'm trackside, it's, I remember watching Brian Scheimer. He coached me after he retired, and he was just a great coach and mentor. And he'd be at a team meeting before a race, and he would tear up, and he'd start crying, and it's like, that's it. That's the, that's the love and passion for the sport. And it's, it's once you do it and you go down the hill at 80 miles an hour in this fiberglass can, it's like, man, you'll never lose that feeling. And it's such a special thing. I don't know any other sport like it, I mean, you could take a ride in a fighter jet, I guess that would be pretty neat. But, we took an adventure writer for Forbes magazine now years ago, and he'd done everything. He'd been up in a MiG up to like Mach 2, and he'd done all kinds of, ridden in a Formula 1 car. And he wrote in his article that this was the most out of control train wreck that he'd ever been down or had in his life, And we took him down the Placid track. I think early days in the Placid track too, when it was still a little more difficult. So he had a good ride, but he said it was the most out of control train wreck he'd ever been in. So, it's a special thing. It's unique, and once you do it a few times, it's one of those things, that you either never do again, or you're hooked for life.
Yeah, well, in a couple of weeks we'll be having the rookie class of 2026, and then from there we'll see who gets to stay in just off of the physicality of the sport.
Yeah. You speak on that, it's really interesting. Memories come in my head of new sliders where you recruit these guys and they can be athletic studs. They can push a sled super fast and run and jump and squat and everything. And you get them on ice and they take one trip, maybe two. You go back to the training center or your lodging and they're packing their bag. And they're leaving the next morning because they're like, listen, man, this great sport is not for me. We've all had that, we've all seen people do that, and you just get it. You just kind of laugh and okay.
Yeah, the two coaches along there, it's like, hey, this guy's great. How did he do? Yeah, he's not coming back.
I had a guy one time, definitely. I don't even remember his name, but he took 2 trips. I came back and he was packing his bags. He was getting a cab to take a train from Westport back to Albany the next morning so that he could fly back home. And he had some story, but either way, I mean, bobsled wasn't for him because a lot of people don't realize you're going 70, 80 miles an hour and you're pulling 5 or 6 G's, continuous G's in these turns. But the instantaneous, the vibrations and the rattling back and forth. Yeah. If you watch any POV facing backwards on the athletes' helmets, you can see how brutal it is on their backs and their spines. And one of our top orthopedic surgeons in town, he's coined the term, bobsled back. You got bobsled back, meaning you have complete degenerative spine and ruptured discs, and you're one stage off of not walking because of the sport. It's a brutal sport, and it's not for everybody. But like I said, for some people, it's just there's nothing like it.
We moved here roughly the same year you retired from the sport, 2012, and 2012 was also the year that Alana Myers Taylor and her group of women were having a spaghetti fundraiser for a bobsled.
No shoot,
So that was the first time seeing bobsledders in person. It used to be the church would house the bobsled athletes back in the day, and so not too many churches smell like bacon in the morning.
That's right. Yeah.
But seeing her, also seeing Steve Holcomb, I resonated with him a lot. I saw myself in him. I have autism and ADHD, something that you can't really see at times in people, but once you get to know him, you might see it a little bit more. And he had
macular degeneration,
and it's something you can't see in the person until much later in life.
Yeah.
And so I saw myself in him.
Yeah.
And so he was my one and only sports hero back in the day.
That's awesome. Yeah, Steve was a great guy. I spent many years traveling with him and living with him in rooms, and he was a good guy. So it's sad that we lost him, but he left a lasting legacy. So he still touches people.
Yeah.
So that's. Now, have you taken a ride in the bobsled yourself?
I have. I took my mom years ago down the 32 track back in the day.
No shoot, yeah.
And then I took her again for the bobsled experience, the mountain coaster.
Yep, very neat, yeah. And I don't know if they're doing wheeled rides out there anymore in the summer, but you ought to get involved in that. I'll see if I can message somebody to get you, because it's awesome. The new track is Lake Placid has a long history of legacy in bobsled. And we've always had a very difficult track. The 32 track was difficult. The 1980 track was difficult. And a new track that was built, we call it the new track, it was built in 1999, 2000.
Yeah.
The Goodwill Games was the first international race held on this track. It was an invitational race. I forget how many nations they invited, but it was 16, 17 different two-man sleds. And I think only 9 qualified to race, and like 4 or 5 finished because the rest just crashed.
Yeah.
It was like, oh wow, yeah, this is Lake Placid. And so we have this track is a great track, has a great legacy, and it's a very difficult driver's track. You're busy here. You're not falling asleep for sure.
Right. It's one of those. If you can navigate this track, you can navigate almost any track.
Anywhere, yeah. And I found that to be true. And my favorite tracks in the world were the more difficult ones. I really liked Altenburg, Germany was my favorite track. I loved the Cortinas. I loved it here. It was the ones where when you make it down, you did something significant.
Yeah.
So it's beautiful.
Yeah, one of my favorite European sliding centers is Koenigsee, and it's hopefully going to reopen this upcoming season.
Koenigsee is a beautiful, beautiful track. It's been around since I think 80, 81. They built Koenigsee, and beautiful track. The S turns are just very unique. 4 back-to-back corners. They have a straightaway that just kind of kinks and beautiful. There used to be a really high pressure turn at the bottom called Ecobahn, and that was my favorite turn in the world. But they reconstructed and got rid of that turn for reasons. So, but that track was beautiful. Yeah, I can't wait till it opens.
Yeah.
Holcomb and I have a very special moment in Koenigsee.
Wow.
In 2010, right before the Olympics, there was a World Cup there, and Holcomb got 2nd place, and I got 3rd place in a 4-man race there. And so we medaled, side by side that year.
Yeah.
But I think we did that 3 or 4 times that year, where we, I think here I won the 2-man that year. He got 2nd in the 2-man, and he won the 4-man, and I got 2nd in the 4-man at World Cup. And then Koenigsee, we did it again, where he got 2nd and I got 3rd, and that was a very special moment to win a World Cup medal on a German track with Holcomb. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, the Koenigsee track, that snake at one of the turns, definitely wakes them. Would wake up any athlete.
Yeah. I'd look forward to that track opening back up on the circuit. So, do you have any favorite tracks of your own that you'd like to go see? What do you think?
I would love to travel the world. I have I would like to see all of them.
Yeah.
But it would probably start off going to Utah or Canada first.
Yeah. Yep. Vancouver is special. It's sad. Calgary is not. That was a beautiful track too.
Hopefully, with the major budget that they finally got, that Canada, the Canadian government is finally $400-some million into Canadian sports.
Oh, so there's a hope then that some could get pieced into the bobsled. That would be awesome. That would be nice. And I know they maintain the refrigeration facility for a push facility there too. So that would be great to see. And that was important for sliding sports in North America. Because for a short period of time, we had 4 tracks in North America.
Yes.
And it was huge. Now it's a little more difficult with only 3 tracks here. So that would be huge to see that come back.
Yeah. My dad, he's a pastor at Lake Placid Baptist Church, and he's very mission oriented, and so I was always volunteered to stuff. So I started volunteering at the bobsled track first as traffic control, park assistant, and then he and I we would gradually walk up to the point where we were at the finish line, moving scabbards.
Very neat. Yeah. That's called voluntold in the military.
Yeah.
Not volunteer. They voluntold. He said, no, you're helping today.
It's pretty much the same thing for me, because my dad always volunteered me for things.
Yeah. No, it's neat to have, like I said, so many volunteers helping the sport, and a lot of volunteers who help the sport over the years personally would fund me, because a lot of people don't know that a lot of bobsledders are personally funded. They go out and they work night jobs, or they work as a server or whatever, and and then during the day they're training, and
Yeah.
that's how they fund their sport. And so a lot of people out volunteers with, hey, you know, how's your training going? And it's all those little pieces, people being around it that make it possible.
So yeah, GoFundMe didn't come out until later. What did you do to fund your sport besides a second job?
Well, a lot of fundraising from connections and people that my family knew for, you know, hey, would you sponsor my son? He's trying to buy some new runners, some new blades to slide on, you know, and back then it was like $3,000 for a new pair. Now it's probably much more, you know. A lot of that, probably the wildest thing I ever did was my father and another old-time slider, Rod Bagos, had a connection at a Harley rendezvous, and a Harley Davidson rendezvous, and as a 15-year-old, we set up a booth with a bobsled, and I had an old Polaroid camera, and I bought a bunch of the film things, and I would $5 to take your picture with the bobsled. And at a Harley rendezvous, you can imagine the bobsled turned into kind of like this prop for, you know, other things. It was like a kissing booth, and it was like, you know, it's like that scene from Cool Runnings where they're trying to raise money. Yeah. That was me at the Harley rendezvous. And so I did that for a few years where we'd set the bobsled up and I'd have the Polaroid camera. And we'd have a little, you know, chalkboard sign, sponsor me, U.S. bobsled team. And I made a lot of money doing that, you know, and it all went back into the sport, and it all made it possible. So that's in the early years how I was able to fund my sport. That, and obviously my parents working 2 jobs at a time. I worked also at the bobsled track for a long time. I started when I was 16 driving passenger sleds. I drove passenger 4-man bobsleds on the old track from the half mile. Faye Gagne at the time, who was the track manager then, he gave me a job as a passenger ride driver. And then Tony Carlino was very instrumental in that too. So every time I was home for a break, I would work all summer. I worked at the bobsled track driving wheeled passenger sleds. When I came home from Christmas break from sliding and racing, I would drive passenger sleds for 14 days straight, I mean, without a break, you know, and doing 46 trips a day from the half mile. And that funded it quite a bit. And then when I was 19, 20 years old, I joined the Army. And I'm still in the Army. I have 19 years in now in the U.S. Army. And I was fortunate enough to be accepted into the World Class Athlete Program. So I competed as a bobsled athlete representing the Army for 2 years prior to the Olympics. So that was really the icing on the cake. So I did everything from setting up bobsled photo booths and taking donations to private sponsors from friends to work. I worked every spare moment I had. My parents contributed, and really the Army supported me the last few years, and that was really the last little bit I needed to buy the top tier equipment to make it to the next level. And that's kind of how I funded my career. So.
Are you going to do anything else this coming season with bobsled and skeleton?
Yeah, I'll be working with para bobsled again this year a little bit.
Okay.
That we'll have a U.S. team selection sometime in November, where we'll select the U.S. team. A couple of the athletes from last year have a buy onto the team because of either their World Cup standing or because of their performance at U.S. National Para Championships. So a couple of those athletes will get a seat on the team, but there's still a few that'll have to compete, you know. Yeah. And so we'll start off with that this year with the U.S. Team selection for para. So I'll be helping out with that as well, and throughout the season we'll see how much we can do. But that's really the involvement. I'd love to see the youth programs revitalized in the future too. That's something that I know the equipment has kind of gotten too aged and dated, and so there's some people now working to kind of update that equipment and revitalize that program, because the youth junior programs in Lake Placid are really, they're a core local program. Yeah. It's something that ties the local community in with that track, you know, and it's very, very important to make sure that we support that.
Yeah, the youth luge program is really big to the point where they have East Coast versus West Coast. Yeah. Ski jumping locally is pretty big.
Yeah. Luge is a model for for the the sliding sports for development. They really are the model. I mean, if you look at what they do, and I know they've changed the names of their teams, but they used to have a slider search that had like 1,000 kids a year try, and then from that they picked like 40 of them, and it went to like a D team, and then the D team went to the C team, and then the C team went to the B team, and then that went to the junior national team, and then it went to the senior national. I mean, it had like 5 tiers of how to make it, and it was very outlined and very structured, and they do a beautiful job with recruitment, and so they're really a great model to look at.
Yeah. There's been a lot of things that happened locally just recently. We had the marathon, we had the Porsche event, and in a couple weeks, in a couple days, we'll be having the horse show grounds.
Yeah.
The horse shows will be opened up again. And then July is, so there has been talks as of last December of the U.S. of us hosting the next future Winter Olympics 2042, I believe.
That would be exciting. Yeah, it'd be really exciting, and it's also exciting to see Park City, it's coming up, and that's going to be. It would be just great to bring the Winter Olympics back to American soil.
Yeah.
So that'll be great with Park City, and then if Lake Placid can kind of pick up the momentum there and carry on, that would be great. I mean, what better Olympic spirit town do you have? It's just, this is a beautiful town for it. And like you pointed out, there's so many sports. There's marathons and horse shows and Ironmans and rugby weekends, and I mean, there's just, this town is just steeped in sport, and it's kind of what started the history of Lake Placid too, was the winter sports and keeping this place open in the winter so that they could come up and snowshoe and ski and skate. And
the word vacation came from the Adirondacks.
Yeah, it did. It really did. So it's a beautiful location. Yeah.
I don't have anything else to say.
All I have to say is I appreciate what you're doing, and not just for people that are unfamiliar with the sport, people that have been around our whole life. Like I said, we get busy and we don't have time to follow every detail, and what you're giving us is a way to stay connected to the sport. And when I watch your video, I say, "Oh, that's neat. I saw the thing about Kenya," and I said, "That's really neat. That's beautiful." And so you really give a lot of us, I guess, old-time retired athletes a way to stay connected and see what's happening and follow it. And you just do a beautiful job at that, and I appreciate it. And I know all the para guys love your videos, and they appreciate it. This year we were over in Europe, and they were competing, and your pieces on them were really meaningful. And so thank you very much for what you do for the sport.
Thank you for being a part of bobsled and skeleton as long as you have, and still behind the scenes as a coach.
I'm lucky and I'm blessed to be able to be a part of the wild thing that we call bobsled and skeleton luge. Sliding sports is wild, and I'm blessed to be a part of it. So thank you.
Yeah.
Cool.